All right, I think we're live. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Medensky. I'm the content manager here at Cintoo, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to this kind of first of its kind live demo session with John Brown from General Motors. And John is the leading supervisor of the reality capture divisions. So we're super pleased to have him on
How you
board
doing?
today. Hi, John. And we're eager to talk about a lot, aren't we? We've been talking in the lead up to this event about so many things that we could share. And I think what we're really eager to learn more about, John, is how, your team has democratized point cloud data, how suppliers are using that data now, and also what the future kind of entails. So, without further ado, I want to first ask you, John, to get our viewers kind of knowing about you a little bit more. Can I ask you how you started in the reality capture division at GM, and also how did Cintoo come into that conversation initially for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thank you to Cintoo for giving us an opportunity to talk about what we do. We always love talking about what we do, not because we're trying to tell everybody, how great it is at GM, which it is, but we usually learn a lot after these events by the feedback that comes back from other companies and other users,
Yeah.
other people out there that are really experts in the industry. So we learn a lot coming out of these things. So thank you for that. As far as how I started with GM was roughly 12 years ago, but I've actually been working with the GM Reality Capture Group for probably closer to 20 years.
Okay.
I worked as a supplier on the outside, actually providing laser scanning services for GM, and I worked with another supplier at that
Yeah.
level, a consulting firm called Metco Services, and then ultimately migrated to a point where I was fortunate enough to get the position inside of GM about
Mhm.
12 years ago, and here we are. As far as Cintoo, Cintoo's really changed things for us in a huge way. How we ended up with Cintoo actually came from one of our suppliers. Like I just mentioned, we learn from our suppliers. There's a company out there, I'm sure a number of people have heard about, called SSOE.
Mhm.
They were already Cintoo users. I would already consider them Cintoo experts at that time. They
Okay.
introduced us to the platform, and it just resonated with us in a big way, and helped to push us into it. So it's been a cool journey over the last 5 or 6 years, working with the suppliers like that,
Yeah.
as well as with Cintoo very closely. So yeah, to where we are today, and the future's bright. As far as
Yeah.
everything goes.
I think, in our conversation together, something I notice about the way you speak about Cintoo and just leveraging the technology is that now it's come to a point where non-experts and experts alike are using it, and you're able to just share that information to whoever you might have on the team or whoever is involved, like supplier wise on the factory layout. So I think the future will probably include more of that, and
Mhm.
we'll get into the details about that, but also in terms of just more of a virtual transformation in the ways we experience walking through a site, facilitating workflows in a site, and things like that. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So for us, I think the real, one of the most amazing things for me about this platform,
Mhm.
personally, is I have been doing, me personally, and this is an old joke for me. I've been doing laser scanning since 1998, right?
Yeah.
So that just means I'm really old. But so I've known for since 1998 what the power of point clouds are, and what the power of reality capture is, and how beneficial this data is, and how robust and full, and just amazing the data is.
Mhm.
It's been hard to convey that message to our user base, or to the people we're trying to sell it to, right? It's been hard to get that information across to them because it wasn't intuitive and easy to use. And we found Cintoo, and this has really bridged that gap. It's taken it from the experts' application and data, and made it usable by the masses. So
Right.
for us, Cintoo is just a phenomenal platform, and has really, like you said, democratized the data and made it mainstream. And
Yeah.
that's a huge thing for the industry at whole. So yeah, this is exciting.
Made it the gold standard. I hear you say that term a lot. So Without going more into my questions that I have, because they're percolating in my mind a little bit, I'm going to let you dive into the presentation, John. So let me get you situated here. And you should be able to share your screen when you're ready.
Okay, let me do that. Hopefully, there. All right, I hate to ask this question, but you can see my screen, correct?
You got it. You got it.
Okay. Okay. So the whole purpose of this presentation today is really to talk about virtualization and the our GM's push to moving to the virtual facility. But from my perspective, us moving to virtual is really opening the doors to the point cloud information and to the reality capture data that we have and making it available to everybody. So from my perspective, this has just been an amazing opportunity to get in front of everybody and talk about this platform and how much it's pushed the availability to the data that we collect. So, as we had mentioned at the beginning here, I am the uh, supervisor for the reality capture team at GM. My group, I'm really fortunate. I have 10 extremely talented technicians in our group that can go either as field people or they can be in the office doing processing. So they're very well versed in all aspects of reality capture. But their primary focus, our primary focus as a team, is through the field collection of the data, the registration of the data, the management of that data, which, as we all know, is a major problem. And then ultimately in the deliverables that are requested, that are really the catalyst to why they come and ask us to actually do our work in the plant, and that is in creating or modifying our layouts, as well as in modeling and mapping the sites at our facilities. My team collects data in all centers for at GM now. It didn't start that way, but we're there now. I sit in and work in the manufacturing group, but we do work for the facilities team or sustainable workplaces. We're starting to do a lot of work in safety, and that'd be more in confined spaces and more hazardous type data collection areas. But we're also really kind of fortunate that we get to work with cool things like the motorsports team. Not that the other groups aren't cool, but we get to work with motorsports and vehicle dynamics teams and the auditing team, and the list goes on and on and on. Our primary platform for collection is obviously LiDAR. We have both static and mobile capabilities. As you can see from the images here on the screen, we're not tied to one vendor. We have a number of different scanners, a number of different types of scanners, and we like that. It gives us the flexibility to apply what we believe to be the correct hardware to a given task, and really helps us do the best work we can possibly do. In addition to that, we also do drone work, both interior for documenting for inspection purposes, maybe some of the systems or steel that's in our facilities, and then on the outside for various types of um, inspection documentation, and then but primarily for mapping and photogrammetry. So our footprint, to give everybody kind of an understanding of what we're up against, our footprint in North America includes 15 assembly facilities, 24 stamping, propulsion, component and battery plants, 21 parts distribution centers, and then 2 engineering campuses. So as you can imagine, that adds up to millions upon millions upon millions of square feet. And with us working with all the different centers in all these different regions, it becomes, quite a task to do this and then maintain and serve the data out to our user base. As I had mentioned early on our conversation today, I've been with GM for about 12 years. Prior to that, I still worked with GM in some capacity or another through suppliers. And I like to refer to that as really GM and Reality Capture 1.0, because it was the very early adoption of the technology in GM. And I'm sure everybody can kind of understand that a company as large as GM, it's kind of hard to get the wheels rolling. So we were really limited to what our task was. And back then, we were referred to as the laser scanning group, the laser scanning guys. And our primary role was just to support for a support role to field checking and then layout updates with a real focus on 2D CAD. So it was the data and that we were collecting was used for a very specific and limited role. And also, what we were doing was also, in addition to that, was also limited to a really specific use case inside of the body plant. We didn't really get outside of that. So when we were working for body and started very early on, most of our focus was at the cell level, with areas of interest that were about 1 to 3,000 square feet, easily manageable. We could just use the data on the back end in platforms like AutoCAD and other softwares that were writing on that AutoCAD. And we were really looking at it for, hey, they want to move a robot here, they want to change the configuration of a cable tray there, they're going to put a fence here, that kind of thing. Very, very specific. As we continued and started to show the benefit at that level of collecting data, it grew to more of a zone level. And at the zone level, now we're talking about anywhere between 5 and 25,000 square feet and more. It could be more. But these are areas that it may include 10 to 15 robots and a much larger area since it's a much larger area, there's just a lot more stuff inside that. But we were at the level where we were collecting maybe 1 or 2 or even up to 5 zones in the plant. And it was starting to, we're starting to realize this is gaining some traction in the plant. Ultimately, we moved to the point where we're collecting data at the center level. And for me, what center means is the entire building, wall to wall. So this would be an entire body shop. And these can range from, and 100,000 really doesn't do any justice, but it can go from 100,000 square feet to well over 1 to 2 to even up to 3 million square feet of floor space of collected data. We were doing this and we were still using it in the same capacity where the focus was on the 2D CAD and updating the layout and using it really more as a support tool. So the downside for that is the data was only being used by the experts, us, my team, the modelers and the mappers. And then it was hidden away on a hard drive somewhere, on the GM network, or an external hard drive that was thrown in a desk drawer somewhere, unfortunately. There was no way to really maintain the data, and there was really no understanding from the plant level back to my group and through the layout teams or the engineering groups that we really existed at that level. So there was no way to maintain it, and we were really only using the data once and then replacing it when it was needed. So as horrible as this sounds, we'd have a 1,000,000 square foot center that we'd hit the delete key on as soon as everything was done. And then we would replace it 2 to 3 years later when there was a model change or a need for new data in the plant. And that would break our hearts because there's a lot of work that goes into collecting this much data. That kind of transitioned us, I'm going to say about 5 years ago when we started to maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we started to hear about the Cintoo platform and through working with a couple of our suppliers. And we really wanted to change the way that we were working for the facility or for the plants and for the company at large. We were now getting requests that were coming from multiple centers. So we might have, a body shop to do here. And then while we were there, we might have the assembly site asking us to do a system for them and the stamping plant to do a press for them. So we were really starting to grow in the amount of data we collected, and we figured that we needed to change our business model very quickly. So we came up with some goals that we wanted to make sure that we stayed true to in order to do this transition. And the first one was that we wanted our data to be relied on as the gold source for the as-found condition data in all of our facilities. And we didn't want to just do that one time. We wanted to do it, and we wanted a platform that was gave us the ability to maintain it over time. We didn't want the one and done approach that we had been following for the previous 10 years, I guess. Next, we wanted it to remain hardware agnostic. So we didn't want to have to rely on, or we didn't want to have to be tied to one sort of a data format because we knew that growing was going to require us to start working with suppliers that could provide the capture services for us in various regions. There was just no way that we were going to be able to do it all with our team. We wanted all the data to sit in a central location for us and make it available to all of our employees and suppliers. We didn't want the data just to remain on a hard drive that was accessible by modeling expert one in our group. And then obviously we wanted to stay true to where we came from, which was supporting our point cloud to layout comparison. And what that means is we wanted to be able to combine dynamically or on the fly CAD and our point clouds and kind of look at things, not necessarily be, the nuts and bolts hardcore. I'm going to start moving things and updating models and making these models totally correct. But just to make sure before an engineering team started to do an assessment or planning for a future program, kind of hand them the keys to the car and let them be able to assess whether or not their layouts were up to date and what level of detail they needed to go out and do plant level investigation, whether it be on site or from our point clouds. And then lastly, we wanted to, but extremely important, we wanted to align globally with our other reality capture teams in other regions of the world. We wanted to make sure that they could leverage this just like we do. We didn't want to be anything else. We didn't want to be doing it a different way than they were doing it, say, in GM China, for instance. So we needed something that was very much standard across the board. And that's how we ultimately ended up with Cintoo. And a lot of that work came from, or a lot of that drove us here was watching, again, a couple of our suppliers that were already using it and seeing how beneficial it was to our projects that they were working on. So it was just a natural transition for us to end up here with Cintoo. As we, progressed, we were already collecting a lot of data, a lot of different huge number of plants. We would be all over the country collecting data. We wanted to start our well, let me back up a little bit. When we moved into Cintoo, we started basically with the same workflow that we were doing in the past, which was very specific to special or certain areas in the plant. We were still doing maybe cell level scanning or station level scanning over in a vehicle systems area where we were just providing very specific information. We were still loading full facilities into Cintoo, but weren't really trying to get it out there or exploring what could be done with Cintoo at that level. We decided to try a pilot project to start it from zero all the way to the final deliverable, and we decided to use a relatively small plant like Bedford Castings. And when I say small, I think our overall square footage is probably in the 3 to 4 million square feet. But we wanted to do all of the buildings. We wanted to have all of the CAD information in there, and we wanted to stay with a small user base through this process so we could truly see the benefit of this through an engineering project. So we stayed with one engineering team, which is a propulsion group, and one supplier that was working on this job with us. In this case, it happened to be SSOE again. So we were lucky that we had a company that was already well versed in this, and they could kind of help us grow through this project as well. I'm going to play a video here that kind of demonstrates what we ended up with in the Bedford project. And right out of the gate, the one thing that's wonderful about the Cintoo platform is the fact that, from a virtual perspective, we're driving down from the map level to a state level to the plant level, and then ultimately we're dropping right into a specific facility, right down to the building. And then further to that, we can continue to zoom in and then drive right to a specific area right on the plant floor. And boom, here we are in our plant with high fidelity imagery, really immersive type feeling, and gets a person, in that plant. The only thing we're missing is the sounds of the plant. But the intuitiveness of being able to navigate very much like a Google Street View was incredibly important and beneficial for us through this project. In addition to that, the platform right at the beginning, this was right when we first got Cintoo, gave us the ability to load CAD data right in here. The nice part about this is it, again, put the keys back in the hand of the engineer and allowed them to be able to do a quick assessment. Does my CAD match my model or my point cloud, or does my model match my point cloud? Almost on the fly. This is one of the things that we heard We got a lot of feedback from the engineering team. They loved this. They absolutely loved this because this alone compressed the startup time for a lot of different tasks on the engineering checklist. It moved things forward for everybody very quickly because they knew they had good data to start with, or they knew they didn't have good data to start with, and maybe they didn't want to engineer there yet. So huge benefit to doing that. In addition to that tool, there are, I'm going to call them the simple tools, air quotes. But being able to put the tools, the keys again back in the engineer's hand, and let them be able to do measurements of components and different aspects of the pieces and parts that are in the plant was just a huge benefit as well. I cannot mention enough the fact that this platform is so intuitive, easy to use for everybody. It keeps people invested in using it, and it doesn't scare anybody off. It's been just a phenomenal experience using it for that capacity. In addition to that, there's tools like the 3D surface that allow our suppliers, for instance, to convert something to a 3D solid, a component, a piece, a part, and then export it and take it into some of the platforms that they're leveraging in different softwares, downstream of what we're collecting. So, although this tool, I would say, is probably in its infancy still, the fact that it's there and is really the first step in that easy button to go from the point cloud to the model, phenomenal. So overall, and I just showed a couple of the tools that were available from this, that we realized inside of that project that we did in Bedford. Just hitting on a couple of those tools, the benefits were realized very quickly by our engineering team. What was really cool for us about it is our interface into the project was kind of tapered off through the engineering, and it fell more into their hands. And it was really nice to see that even downstream, weeks or months later, that those engineers or those suppliers were still leveraging our data, and with very little communication back to us, which is ultimately what we're hoping to get to. So it was really a great and exciting and very positive result that came out of that. The next thing I'd like to show is kind of like how it's migrated from there a little bit into other centers, and how we have. And this is going to give you an example of a general assembly that we have. But we have the point cloud data, we have all of the really fantastic information here, and this is just building on the tools that were already there. Our facilities are extremely complex, and they're hard to get around if you've never been in one. You even if you've been in one general assembly, it doesn't necessarily translate to the next. So getting your way around them is sometimes very difficult, and being able to highlight specific areas in the plant and catalog them directly in Cintoo, and then share that information with a team member down the line through a web link. Again, this is extremely powerful. This drives a person right to a specific spot in the plant and gives them a great understanding of what they're up against as far as what they're looking for. Taking it a bit further, we can not only do that, but we're also, and the one thing I'd like to mention here, this is an example of what we're doing. This isn't live data. I mean, this is something we put together for the presentation, but it is a good example of what we're using it for. We can tag specific areas in these areas, or specific objects in these areas, and tie lockout, tagout procedures, training manuals, maintenance procedures directly to this, and again, drive a user right to it. There's that way nothing gets lost in translation, and everything stays fluid in how we're leveraging the data inside of our facilities, and continuing to use this information even though we've finished the upfront aspects of collecting the data, developing and updating our layout, and then now we're putting it out there and making it usable downstream. So that 2-year period between when we've collected it and when we need to go back out and continue updating it, even though we're doing updates in between, that data is being used all the time now. We're finding engineers in there tagging things with various measurements. Here's a good example where measurements are being tagged and put into our Cintoo cloud. It's now become an engineering tool, and we're basically handing it off when we're done. Phenomenal for us. I want to show another example. This is again an example that we put together for the purpose of this presentation, but it gives a good understanding of how we're leveraging it from utilizing our point cloud data as a design environment. So here's a point cloud we've collected in a body shop. And what we want to do, this is an example of maybe an engineer wants to drop a new robot into position in this environment. They want to understand whether or not it's going to fit. What are the potential interferences that they're going to run into both at a high level above the robot, at a floor level where they're planning to set the robot, and then maybe they want to convey the information back to or with another person that's involved with this on the project team. This gives us now this isn't hardcore engineering, as I'm sure everybody on the call understands, but just in being able to get in here and assess an area and then communicate, use it as a collaborative environment, is an extremely powerful tool for us, because the key to everything with us is less downtime in the plant and quicker to engineering, so that we can do an install and get things placed and out of there, and then get us out of there, so that we can get back to what we do, which is building cars. We don't want to spend a lot of time building and installing tools. We want to do it very efficiently. So this having this ability here inside of Cintoo to be able to assess the potential installation area for a tool like this, and then to convey information back and forth between team members has proved to be extremely beneficial as well. Now, we're still at the point where we're doing this at maybe a tool level or a rack level, or maybe even a control box level, as opposed to plant wide. But the future is definitely bright as far as this, using things in this capacity, using this platform in this capacity goes. So, we're really excited about where this is leading us. And again, this is all being done by the engineering teams and their relationships with their suppliers, and leaving us out of it, and really driving us back to what we're one of our additional goals, which was ultimately to become librarians for the data, as opposed to the people that are going to be the ones that everybody relies on for leveraging the data for what we're trying to use it for. I also like to lastly kind of bring up where we're at today with the amount of data that we've collected in our user base. Currently, we have 41 active projects in Cintoo. It's growing so quickly. It's literally it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot for us, because it's happening so quickly. We're right now at 41 active projects. As of yesterday, we were at 1,610 users of our data. And these aren't all one-time users. These are teams that are getting in there and really getting their hands dirty and involved with our point cloud data and really leveraging it. And what this is amounting to is right now we're at 89,000 scans. We think before the end of this year, we're going to have an additional 20,000 scans uploaded. And next year, we expect to hit 150,000 scans by the end of the year. And that's all based on workflow we have in the queue. So Cintoo for us has not only has it democratized the data and made it available to everybody. That was key for us. But it's also gotten us to the point where we can really now start to hand off the data and start working with our supply base to maybe maintain it for us, right? So we partition our data off at the cell level in a body shop, and the station level in a vehicle assembly plant, and that means smaller pieces of the puzzle. I can hand this off to a regional supplier and ask them, go out and collect these 4 cells for me, and then upload them right into our Cintoo database. And it just keeps our data living. Now it's a living, breathing thing, and Cintoo has really made it that way for us. So it's exciting for where we're going with it. I do think that this is just going to continue to grow. And I do see a time in the very near future, not too far future, not too distant future, where our need for collection, from my perspective, is going to drop significantly. A lot of it's going to maybe be done on the plant side, the collection, as things are changing. They're being updated right into Cintoo and democratizing it even further. So this is all positive for us. Just a you know again, I can't say it enough. It's really been a business changing application for us moving forward. So that's the information I wanted to share with you, and I'll hand it back over to Maddie.
Thank you, John. So we're talking about the future a little bit here, and I loved how you're talking about the data really being a living, breathing entity, and that point of facilitation where now, okay, everyone is kind of organized around that. And I'm curious to know how that might change for you in the future. And in a moment here, I'll invite Nick, our head of customer success, on to talk about where Cintoo's headed with their future development. But John, I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are in terms of how do you visualize your user base using Cintoo or using the data going forward in the future?
So it's a great question. It's one that I'm getting a lot more often, internal to GM actually. There is a real desire on GM's side to move to a totally virtual build of our
Mhm.
vehicles, modifications of our plants, and it just continues to back out from there. VR, AR, immersive is the thing that we're driving towards. The great thing about the data that we collect, it's already kind of put there, or it's already in a format that can be that base, or that
Right.
immersive base. So we're really looking to start pushing ourselves over to getting people more deeply involved with our data from an immersive VR AR standpoint. And it seems like that we've uh, as we continue to capture the data, post it up there, and people are starting to get more involved with it. The great thing is I'm not having to sell it off as you can do this or you can do that.
Mhm.
Our users are looking at it and saying, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I think what's great is Cintoo is kind of on that same path without actually even being cued to do it.
Right.
So yeah, the immersive is a thing for us.
Okay, speaking about immersive, I'm going to invite Nick, our head of customer success, on to the presentation to talk a little bit about the Cintoo development, what the future looks like. In that regard, Nick, thank you so much. I think you're able to go ahead.
Great. Yeah, thanks for happy to be here. Thanks everybody. So I think maybe John, before we start the video, I had one question for you, and I'm curious from my end. Have you been able to physically visit every GM facility and see them in person yet?
Well, myself, um, only because of my job, yes. Not
Okay.
every facility, but all the manufacturing facilities. But I think that's inherent to my job. I think if I was going to answer the question in more of a GM employee standpoint, I would say absolutely not. There's just too many of them. They're too far apart, and no.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I think I kind of had that thought when you were going through and presenting your story of how you started with reality capture at GM, how you eventually found Cintoo and tied that into how you've evolved to use reality capture data as part of your workflows and daily process. And I think the marrying of reality capture and existing spaces and facilities, and what we're talking about now with XR and everything that has to do with VR and AR, the marrying of those is really going to be to enable anybody to visit any location that's been captured and virtualized instantly at any time. So go ahead and play the video, and I'll just show a quick example. This is going to be a very quick sneak peek of what we're moving toward and working on at Cintoo. So this is actually going to be part of that GM facility that John was presenting in a desktop-based VR application. So with the Cintoo data being streamed to our VR desktop app, you'll be able to switch over to basically a VR immersive view, be able to view this scan data and these high resolution meshes from Cintoo at a full one-to-one scale. And navigating in this type of data in an immersive environment is going to be as easy as just looking around, being able to see the actual scan locations and view those, and with a simple click of a controller, be able to hop from one scan to another. we can view that same robot arm model at 1-to-1 scale and get a really full immersive view of the data. We can use teleport to move around the 3D data and not be tied to those specific scan setups or scan locations. So we can use that teleport mechanism that we already have in our web app and be able to teleport around this data. And then two other features that we're currently working on is our ability to toggle the view between the scans and the models. So you can actually view what's existing as built that's existing in the scan data. And then you can overlay that with the model and toggle the visibility between scans and models to see how those different data sets and different 3D elements overlay and interact with each other. And then as part of our VR experience app, you also be able to do things like quick measurements. You can use our measurement tool, use your VR controllers within your immersive environment and snap measurements and get that quick information that you need in this one-to-one full scale kind of immersive environment. So this is just a really quick preview and sneak peek of what we're working on in the VR, AR, and XR space. And I want to give a big thank you to John and the team at GM for letting us use some of this sample data that you've captured from your facilities. And you guys have been a great partner, and I'm excited to see where we kind of take this in the future.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, if I just wanted to sum it up, based on that one video that you just showed there, I think Cintoo has allowed us to truly bring the plant to the engineer, which is kind of hitting on what Maddie had just asked, or what you had just asked. I'm sorry, Nick, about have we been able to travel there? No, I mean, it's very difficult to do that, costly and time consuming, and being able to bring the plant to the engineer is key. It's been something. It's been kind of the mantra of scanning around GM for a number of years, but I think it's finally here, truly here, where the plant is being brought to the desktop of the engineer. And this is great. It's great working with Cintoo, and I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing for us, and love working with you. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much, John. I'm going to toggle over to my Q&A slide here, where we can see all three of us, which is great. Thank you so much for this presentation again. I think it was so insightful. And I don't see any questions in the chat, but I have my own questions, John, if you wouldn't mind me asking a couple. But you just talked about, the need to eliminate on cost, travel time, and putting that data in the hands of engineers, other suppliers. I'm curious, though, to know what your user base is also using Cintoo for. Like when we talked about the measurement aspect, annotations, are those type of tools that they find helpful in terms of using in their own workflows now?
Very much so, but there's also other tools that are being leveraged heavily. The heat mapping, which is comparing two sets of data together, is
Yeah.
something that's being leveraged not only in our facilities team, but also from our some of our manufacturing teams. Comparing, maybe where does this set of I'm an example might be, hey, I have some conveyors that are in this area. I want to load them in and see where they're really at on the floor. Let's do some comparisons between the two sets. Heat mapping's been big for us, but I think we are still in our infancy of utilizing the tools that are there for us. But the fact that even a few of these tools are being leveraged by our engineers is
Mhm.
just amazing, right? Because normally what would happen is they'll look at it for 4 or 5 minutes and then they're off and running on a different direction. But now they're getting into the data, and we're noticing. I see it as I walk through the tech center in Warren. I'll see Cintoo on screens all throughout the engineering groups, and it's phenomenal to see one plant over here, one robot over there, but always the Cintoo screen that's up with these integrators and engineers. So to what level they're using it, I don't know. Maybe some are just looking at it for the first time, but maybe some are really relying on it. Either way, it's really growing in a way that's really great to see in the company. So
And this is global too. I think in one conversation you said you were talking to teams in China, in Africa even. So it's all over the place, right?
it is. We're working closely with a team right now in South Korea,
Yeah.
and they're transitioning into wanting to put some data into our Cintoo server and having a lot of success with it. And that's a testament to how easy the platform is to use. We are also working with a team in South America to do the same thing. And this is a very experienced team that is already coming from utilizing a different platform, and they're seeing a lot of benefit and benefit to changing over to the Cintoo platform as well. So yeah, regionally it's the same thing, and that's what's neat about, or really cool about this whole thing, is that Cintoo is an apples to apples comparison. No matter where you look at it,
Right.
in what region we're doing it globally. So really good for us as a company.
Right. Okay. And then I would say on that note, as a company, my thinking is more like, how does this make your team and GM just as a whole? This might be a really broad question, but how is this making the company more agile? So we talk about GM is really fostering this virtual reality growth, but this virtual transformation growth. And how do you see that playing out in not only what you do, but what the company does at scale?
Well, so I got to be careful with speaking for the company. I can't
Right.
really do that. But what I can say is that the ability to share this data across the globe for whatever need is allows us to do work share. And how does that make us more nimble? It allows us to instead of staffing up in one area or staffing down in one area, we're able to kind of share the work around the globe through this
Mhm.
platform and get things up to speed and realize ready to roll from an engineering perspective much quicker. The virtualization aspect of it, the AR, VR, this is a growing and emerging technology even today, even though it's been around for a while. We're on the back end of it as far as staying involved with it, but I am getting a number of requests for being able to get into our data in that capacity. So, and
Right.
that's coming that's coming all over the globe as well. So, I think the biggest key to it is being available globally and standardized for us is making us more nimble and being able to share across the globe.
And there is some questions in the chat here, John, actually. Sorry, I've skipped through them a little bit. So I have one that Nick has shared and another one. I'll start with Nick's from Matt Gray at KPMG. John, what was the compelling driver for GM to invest in reality capture 1.0? So at the very beginning.
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Yeah.
The reason that reality capture or laser scanning back then was brought into GM was because we were having a very difficult time keeping our plant layouts up to date and understanding where modifications needed to be made to that plant layout moving forward. We were always running into situations where an engineering team or an install team would walk into the facility and start to try to put their tools in, and things didn't fit because the plans didn't match what they were finding on the floor. That was really the catalyst to bringing the technology into GM as a whole. And I think that's pretty, almost all the industries that I've been fortunate enough to work in over the years, it's almost the same story everywhere. Whether it's public works, wastewater, water, wastewater, their plants didn't match. What was on the floor did not match what they had in their legacy drawings. So that was the real catalyst to getting it in there and getting things up to speed. And it
Mm,
was kind of, I think it was probably it was looked at as a complement to us transitioning to 3D CAD as well. And it just kind of made sense at the time, even though the technology was still a fringe technology back
right.
then.
And then I have one, I'll get to Jacob's question in one moment. There's one here. With the outsourcing of the data collection to external suppliers, has GM had any issues with the quality of data collected or missing data from a requested scanned area?
That's another great question.
Hmm.
Short answer would be yeah. We've run it. We had growing. I'm gonna say we had growing pains, right? Because you walk into this animal that's an assembly facility or a body assembly or a body center. They're incredibly overwhelming when you first walk in and see it because everything's moving, nothing's static. But with that, we have a really well-defined process for how we data collection is done in our facilities, what our expectation is for the data that we're receiving, the formats that we would like it in, and then kind of how we build that point cloud pyramid, where we start from a base with our plant datums and then ultimately end up to what's being delivered to the plant is very well defined and very well laid out. So to answer the question quickly, which I don't do often, early on, it was a problem. We learned. Where we're at now, I can hand somebody some standards to follow. And generally speaking, the companies and teams that we work with are very high caliber and they do great work for us.
That's really good to hear. And then this one from Jacob is a little bit different. Oh, actually, I think that's the same question. Okay, so it's just about the data collection again. Okay, I don't know if there's any more questions. One moment. Oh, here's a question. With the reality capture team in place and the Cintoo platform, do you feel you are able to keep up to date with the plant's existing state? Or does the assembly plant still make changes without updates in CAD? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, and that is really that's the elephant in the room for us still,
Okay.
even to this day. It's how are we going to convey the notice of change from the plant back to us so that we know we need to update that area or that facility. The nice thing is we've gone from instead of it being a plant wide 2 million square foot issue, we've now the way that we're collecting the data, the way that we host it in Cintoo is very much like a puzzle. We have a bunch of puzzle pieces in there now. I can everything in a vehicle assembly is done at a station level, so we can take a station and get rid of it and put a new station. As soon as we solve the issue of getting plant to talk to corporate, we're in a good place and we're working through that. But I think that it's just going to naturally happen, right? And I think that the way that that's going to happen is by sensors getting more mobile and easier to use and more cost effective to put in the facilities to allow documentation to be done on the plant side. So not only do I talk about documentation or point clouds or Cintoo um, democratizing our point cloud data, I also think that hardware is moving in a way that it's going to democratize point cloud capture, which is going to help us as well, right? And truly move us into that data librarian role to where a plant tells me zone one has changed and here's the data. And we're going to take it, we're going to look at it, and then we're going to drop it into our Cintoo server and get it out to the engineers. So that's where we ultimately want to get. But yeah, we're still kind of hung up in that communication aspect of it. As you can imagine, 15 manufacturing facilities, millions of square feet, thousands of people. How do we get the information? It's still an issue.
But getting it to that holistic process point is, evolving always. It
And
sounds like.
it's moving quick, and it's moving
Yeah.
quick, right?
Yeah. So there's a last question here, I think. So from Jacob again, who asked about the data collection in general, but does GM use survey control when scanning?
Yes, we do. Everything that we do runs with a base survey control network through the plants. And another great question, and thank you very much for this one. Everything that we look at our data as a pyramid, right? The top is our final deliverable, and the basis always starts with the survey control network through our plant, and we build it up from there. Everything that we have starts with the survey control network, and then it relates itself to the plant grid, which are the columns and various monuments in the facility, and then it just goes up from there. We want it in order for something like Cintoo to work for us. All of the data that we have in the plant has to fit together like the perfect sandwich, and it can't happen if we don't have survey.
Right. Right. So that end-to-end process. Okay, I think I don't see anything else. I'm going to be kind of wary for another moment here, just in case the last question comes in. But John, thank you so much for your
Of
time
course.
today. This has been a really insightful presentation, and just learning more about how transformations are taking place virtually, I think is just really interesting to hear about and useful to people. And Nick, thank you for coming on board and talking about Cintoo's own development in the future and how that might come into play in GM's own role, right? So we're kind of thinking
Absolutely.
ahead together, and it'll be exciting to see where that goes. So with if there's anything else, I think we're good. I'm going to close out this session. Thank you to you both again, and thank you
All
to
right.
everyone who came aboard today and had a chance to view the presentation.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye
See
bye.
ya.
Bye.